All right, so today we have our semi-regular check-in with my friend Paco Nathan, founder of
Hey,
Derwin, a boutique consultancy focused on data and AI. And more importantly, he is principal developer relations engineer at Sensing, where he works at Graph AI and Graph Intelligence. So Paco, welcome back.
thank you, Ben. Great to be here.
All right, so the first topic is as we record this the week after the AI Action Summit in Paris, which I don't know to what
Yeah,
extent you follow that, Paco, but let me
absolutely.
let me go through some of the key takeaways I think for teams who are building AI applications, and then we can discuss each of them. The first takeaway is there seems to be a signaling towards more deregulation and lighter touch as far as governance. As our listeners know, the Trump administration has long signaled that they will be a lot more hands off compared to the Biden administration when it comes to AI regulation. Now, at the AI Action Summit, the Europeans seem to have also uh, kind of gotten the message that in order for them to thrive and compete, they may want to take their foot off the gas of the regulation uh, aspect of things. Although I'm not quite sure how it's going to play out because the EU AI Act is still there, but maybe they're not going to be as strict in terms of enforcing it. So if I were to say there's three buckets, right? So there's the US, which is very much deregulation. And then there's a whole swath of European countries, basically almost all of them somewhere in the middle. And then the ones that might still be much more regulation friendly would be Germany, right? So, but you can throw in France and UK are the biggest countries probably that are in the middle of this spectrum. So anyway, so for AI teams, I don't know how that's going to play out because even in the US, right? So in the US, on the federal level, obviously the Trump administration has signaled they will be hands off compared to the Biden folks. But the states are starting to put on state level rules, right? So Colorado has
Yeah,
an AI Act
right.
that's already in place. So I think that what this means for AI teams is still basically the same, which might still mean just like in the data privacy world, you look at the the whole world and you go, okay, where am I doing business? And in the places that I'm doing business, where's the strictest rules? I just plan according to the strictest rules. Otherwise, otherwise I can't plan for 500 different rules, right? So I think that's still probably the sound advice here, which is basically look at where you're doing business and kind of gauge as to where the strictest rules and strictest enforcement will be. And you might want to just kind of build your systems around those so that you're protected regardless of where you are. So anyway, so that's takeaway number one for EU AI Act. I don't know if you want to react.
Yeah, no, you had an excellent discussion with Andrew Burt uh, ab- about this, and we're, to try to paraphrase from it, what you're just saying. We saw this a decade ago with privacy, where there was, regulation was all over the map, but basically you tried to find out where the strictest were amongst the states, typically California, and then target that, and then your bases are covered. And a very similar trajectory seems to be followed in terms of U.S. policy regarding any kind of regulation of AI applications. That makes sense. I guess the other thing I would add to this first point is that when you talk with people who have been charged by EU to do formal analysis of the EU AI Act, the main takeaway is it's entirely subject to interpretation, in stark contrast to, say, GDPR, which was very clear and very resolute. Here's what we're going to do. The AI Act is sort of like, well, here's some nice ideas, and there's really nothing tangible. I talked to somebody whose actual job is try to represent the new rules coming in place in terms of some sort of structured knowledge base, and they virtually gave up because every point was basically no, talk to your attorneys, no, talk to your attorneys. There's just not a lot I think that could it, it's wishful thinking policy. So I to your point, I don't know that EU is going to come down hard on this. I think they have some very strict concerns based on how, especially the U.S. administration turns out. EU will be responding to that.
Yeah, and then I think the new EU commissioners are maybe a little more less regulatory in their mindset. And then obviously the heads of state of these countries, at least at this summit, seem to signal that they will be more friendly to companies moving forward. So, which brings me to the second takeaway in this AI Action Summit in Paris, which is at least the tone among Europeans will be, let's look at shifting from AI safety to kind of commercial benefits of these AI applications. Because one thing that people who attended the summit, and I wasn't there, right? So I'm just going by what I read and what people have told me, is that there seems to be the safety people were not around this time around. So and I have mixed feelings about the AI safety community, broadly speaking, not going into the specifics of which individuals, but basically, I think the takeaway that people seem to suggest is that the safety people were not around, at least not in large amounts, and then the talk was more in terms of how do we position uh, Europe so that it's not so left behind. So, in other words, let's focus a little bit more on the commercial aspects.
Yeah, I mean there seemed to be a substantial amount of discussion about infrastructure and sustainability. I think that these concerns were brought forward more, and also they're extremely immediate when you look at the energy costs and the impact vis-a-vis climate and climate being embattled in general.
Yeah, yeah, and then which brings me to the third takeaway, which is basically uh, you know, uh, takeaway one was let's be lighter touch on the regulation. Takeaway two, let's focus on economic and business opportunities and maybe
Yeah,
de-emphasize safety a little bit, at least at the summit. And then finally, I think the third takeaway that I want to highlight, at least on this conversation, is Europeans probably signaling let's focus on the application layer. Um, Maybe it doesn't make sense for us to compete on the foundation model layer too much, right? Because uh, that might be dominated by China and the US. So let's focus on the areas where we think we have an advantage, and that might be in the application layer, or at least we can deliver interesting applications and solutions. Uh, just because everyone is still working their way through in terms of how to build, what to build, how to build, and so on and so forth. The foundation model layer is moving fast, and it's expensive, and requires a lot of talent that they may have a hard time retaining, but nevertheless, there's even here in the U.S. By the way, most companies are not competing at the foundation model layer, right? So most companies just realize, okay, so we'll have access to a large collection, a large variety of pre-trained models, and we'll go from there. So I think that there was some signaling and realization around that, which is where can we drive tangible economic value and address real world challenges. So particularly in Europe, the focus seems to be let's move towards building innovative applications on top of these foundation models.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I mean, and there are big concerns in pharma, finance, manufacturing, elsewhere that have global impact. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And you, Paco, you spent time in Europe, right? So I think that
Yeah.
it seems like that they have enough sectors and they have enough very, very application specific, very domain specific opportunities that they can really exploit. Uh, i-
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think that there's a huge opportunities in terms of like financial services and a lot around finance. And of course, this is really big, especially in London, but elsewhere, Zurich and whatnot. There's also just a lot of manufacturing, a lot of pharma that I've been involved with. And these are, I mean, I haven't been involved with all the companies, but I mean, seeing the companies I've been involved with where they are also cooperating with partners who are also large concerns. A lot of this is happening in Europe, and like I said, there are great consequences from that during the pandemic. Directly applied. The phrase that I think I mentioned before, but what I heard at a recent conference, AI conference, is if you're not doing AI, you're not doing pharma. So yeah, I think you're right. It's at the application layer, if even the foundation models. I mean, I think there was also a lot of discussion more about applications based on smaller models. So I
and
don't know.
uh,
Maybe
and
that's just semantics on my part.
and they have sectors too, like gas, energy,
Yeah, energy.
alternative energy, right? So
Yeah, energy, agriculture, etc. So
yeah, yeah, transportation, the train systems and things like that, right? So lots of opportunity for uh, for building interesting companies at the application layer.
yeah, yeah, so much going on in transportation, and so many opportunities in energy. A lot of that is still emerging, but what happens after oil? So I think that Europe is definitely scrambling for alternatives in terms of energy supply because of prior reliance on Russia and the looming threat of not allowing that to recur. Also,
And
just taking advantage of Africa. I
yeah,
mean, energy deals with Africa where there might be, there are some pretty large scale pie in the sky ideas of having electric grids that cross through the Mediterranean, where there could be like solar farms in North Africa, for instance.
and tying this to even more recent news, which is uh, the likely scenario that there's going to be some decoupling on the defense side with the U.S. So maybe
Yeah,
their military and defense sectors will need to also. I mean, there will be more investment, right? So they will have to
yeah.
invest in their own defense industries and their own militaries. So there will be a lot of opportunities there for building uh, AI solutions uh, that in those specific sectors, right? So I think we discussed this before in the war in Ukraine, right? So
Yeah,
the
exactly.
basically the drone industry in Ukraine has become world class in the span of 2 years, right? So
It's where you go to test. It's where the companies go to test, right? And it's fascinating. Well, I mean, it's really interesting from that perspective in terms of not a huge amount of capital, could we say, that's being applied effectively against what had been considered a major, world power, military power, extremely well funded, Russia. But it's fairly asymmetric in terms of the return on investment of using drone warfare in a lot of ways, whether it's underwater or in the on station or loitering weapons, those kind of things. So much is being used, and it's changing the nature of munitions, right? So Europe could end up being quite an innovator there.
yeah, yeah, and this is the classic necessity is the mother of invention. And
Yeah,
I think actually this drone industry in Ukraine, fast forward, hopefully they have they secure a nice peace treaty and there's relative peace for in Ukraine in the years ahead. I think this could be the beginnings of an industry inside Ukraine that will actually export out of Ukraine, right? So,
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, and also take a look at where does machine learning come into transportation? Like for instance, that I guess you could probably draw the analogy of like the really high-end electronic or electric powertrains are coming out of Eastern Europe, out of the Balkans. So it's interesting, yeah, about necessity driving invention. We could see a potential tech hotspot emerging there.
yeah, yeah. And then just generally in the continent itself, I think they will have to increase military spending. I think it looks like it. It looks
Yeah.
like that's going to be necessary for them. So there will be lots of uh, military-related AI companies that will have to be, unless they want to import all their kit from the US, right? So,
Right, right,
which
exactly.
they
No,
might have to in the beginning, but I think what even the American military uh, companies are looking at what the Ukrainians have done and going, "Holy cow, we can't build and deliver anything that cheap," right? So we're
yeah,
not we're our
yeah.
DNA is not has not been built around this kind of low cost solutions, right? So
Yeah, I'm not the expert. I can't give an elevator pitch summary, but I mean, certainly the US has been gearing toward face-offs in the Pacific, potential face-off with China, and looking and putting investments toward things like, well, there's a lot of electronic warfare that's come up over the past, couple decades. What are the implications when there are really long corridors of attack, long corridors of supply chains? Where EW could just scramble a lot of operations and logistics being the thing that the US has preeminence in worldwide in terms of sustained warfare is in logistics. That's how we won World War II. Um, so I think that the US has really been taking a good hard look at what happens out in the Pacific, and also the newer platforms like CCA, like having a really advanced fighter jet that has a constellation of semi-autonomous drones around it, and those kinds of policies and strategies leading toward very different development, right? Whereas in Ukraine, we're like, no, we've got some loitering munitions where like a grenade can take out a tank. There's huge ROI. So it's very different strategies of warfare. And it's not clear that the US can really turn on a dime to just uptake what's going on, the innovations coming out of Ukraine, although they are engaged. So yeah, it seems like UK and Europe are poised to really take advantage of that.
and they won't have any choice, I think, right? So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's how it's being shaped. This is the conversation we have to have now. The conversation we didn't want to have to have.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. All right. So then the second family of trends I want to focus on is around foundation models. And I actually wrote a post on what's next for foundation models 2025 and beyond. I'll just cherry pick a few items out of that post. The first one is multimodal. You've heard us talk about a lot about multimodal, but it tended to be a little more abstract. I think now, of course, the people, for example, who use Gemini, the new Gemini model, know that multimodal is here, right? So you can use multimodal. You can use a multimodal reasoning model, which is what Gemini is. You can upload video, audio, PDF files, and it'll process it. But looking ahead, there's a few multimodal models that are just at the recently open sourced level, which gives us hints of where we might be going next, right? So the first one is called Hibiki, Hibiki. It's out of Japan. This is high fidelity simultaneous speech to speech translation. So imagine you want a translator that can keep up with you as you speak, and that's what the system is, right? So, because traditionally, translators wait for you to finish talking and then it starts doing its thing. But this open source project is different. It's designed to understand enough of what you're saying at a moment and then start giving the right translation right away. So you look at this project, you go, how far away are we from going to another country and just having this on our phone? I don't think it's that far.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Or
mean,
browser embedded in web pages that
yeah,
are
I mean, this
that
would
are
be in an iPhone. It'll be free,
yeah.
a local app, right? And what does that mean for Duolingo? I don't know.
Well, some of us will still be investing a lot of time in
Yeah,
Duolingo.
it's
I
still
probably
good.
won't.
It's still good for your brain, right? To learn a language. But this just is really kind of uh, a science fiction from, when you were 20 years ago, you would think this is science fiction, but we're literally probably, I would say by the end of the year, you might start seeing some of these, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was talking with somebody who'd been a translator at The Hague, and I mean, they are seeing a lot of those kind of translator roles just kind of getting wiped out. I mean, there's still obviously a lot of
Yeah.
room for like understanding the nuances, and when there are political
Yeah,
discussions,
that's a
obviously
very
this is
different.
way
Yeah,
beyond.
yeah.
Yeah,
We're
but
talking
I mean,
about we're talking about us as tourists going somewhere where
yeah,
it doesn't have to be perfect, right?
yeah, if using CRF levels, maybe if you're like at A2 or even like B1, and you're still going to get stuck at times, right? When you're going through an area that has a weird dialect,
Yeah,
and like how do you translate with people? Yeah, as tourists. I mean, I think that if you're in a business meeting or giving a technical presentation, it's far beyond the level of what these models will be capable of
yeah,
in the near future. Maybe eventually, but there's a cutoff there, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah. This is at least on the consumer side, it might, this is by the end of the year, probably we will have
yeah,
some manifestation of this.
yeah, and a wide range of low power applications. So yes, it could be on your iPhone, but it could also be in embedded devices. And what do you use when you're traveling? I mean, you've got your luggage, you've got your phone. Um,
I mean, look, I mean,
yeah.
Paco, there wasn't, was it like 10, 15 years ago, we would still buy travel guides, physical travel guides, right? Right. And then maybe 20 years ago, we still would go to AAA for maps, right?
Well, maybe okay, yeah, yeah. No, I guess so. Yeah,
So
I guess people will.
I think this will be the end of those phrase books, at least.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting. Although I mean, at the same time, though, you are seeing a resurgence of a lot of regional languages and dialects coming up, where it's just part of identity of, yeah, okay, we speak English, but we also have our own dialect. We almost feel that in I mean, I live a couple
Yeah.
hours north of you.
Yeah.
We almost feel that in Northern California. It's like, well, we have ways of talking that, the Southerners won't be able to figure out. But you see that if you're on the border of like France and Belgium, there's, dialects that are very different from Paris. And I think that, yeah, we'll probably see more resurgence of that. That's certainly happening in places like Wales and Cornwall. Um, but, at the same time, there's just as everywhere you go, there's English, right?
Yeah.
So the translators have probably less and less of a bar because you can get by with more English and then more translation for the fine point details. But what do you need it for? You know what you need it for when you're traveling is like the horrendous UI on like the train schedules or
Yeah. Yeah.
trying to buy tickets in country. I would say that the real problems are there's a lot of websites that need to be rebuilt.
Right. Right. All right. So then the second example I have is from ByteDance. It's called Omni Human. So this open source model can generate videos based on a single human image. So human videos based on a single human image and motion signals. So example, audio or video only. But basically, you can now have examples of, you take a picture of Paco and you can make Paco dance, right? So uh, obviously, this sounds like a fun application for now for like doing things on TikTok maybe or social media, but I don't know. Uh, I'm sure there's applications that we haven't dreamt of that might be more
Yeah.
practical than we can imagine, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah. But doesn't this also recall, I think the first generative use case that I saw out of Berkeley was like one of the researchers dancing, whereas he did not actually dance
Oh
in
yeah,
real
yeah,
life
yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
tournament.
but the things about this is they're getting more and more accessible. These
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
models.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of places this can be used. Probably for a lot of training. There's a lot of really good uses for this kind of thing because video is just so useful in training.
And the third example I have is from DeepSeek. They have a series of models, which they call the Janus series. The latest one is the Janus Pro. And basically, this is like a visual language model, right? So this single model can basically accurately describe an image, answer questions about visual content, and then also generate high quality images from text descriptions, right? So I think we talked about this in the past. So this is more, I think, at the level of an image, but you can imagine fast forward a year from now, maybe less, you now have the equivalent of this for video, where you go, here's a
Right.
2 hour video, describe to me what's happening in this video. And like I said, not everything can be transcribed because not everything is vocal in the video,
Right.
right?
Right.
So describe to me, you can imagine, I guess one application would be in sports. If you're a scouting a team and you don't want to watch hours and hours of video, you go, just find me examples of where Paco is doing the following.
Well,
And
that's already going on in Europe. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
obviously, soccer,
yeah,
football
yeah.
is so popular. But I
But
mean,
now,
even
but
like
now strictly from the
middle
video,
school,
yeah, yeah, not
yeah.
not not from the metadata itself, right? So,
No,
so
no, there are applications analyzing the video of like middle school teams,
yeah, yeah,
because
no, but I
all of
mean
these are
that,
televised.
but that's because they have a tracking thing on the ball or something. Here, there's nothing. There's raw footage of the video, nothing.
I've seen applications in Spain actually using raw footage of video because
Huh.
all of those games, even like the middle school games, are televised. So yeah, I think we'll see a lot more of that, but also probably also like on factory floors, analyzing how people are doing jobs. Maybe there's some issues, repetitive
Oh
motion.
yeah,
I don't know,
yeah, yeah. No, no,
things like
but
that.
what's impressive about this model is it's free, and it's
Yeah,
right. And it's open source, right? So why do these all these this move towards multimodality matter? Well, it's because
right.
basically I think we will need a lot more than just simple text generation, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
especially when you're integrating with external systems or you want to dynamically execute a task, right?
And also just, I mean, we do not live in a world where data quality is perfect. So the other big application I've seen, one of the other big applications I've seen for multimodal models is where maybe in one mode you have part of the data that you need, but another mode can fix the broken links. So you might have some geospatial info at points, at other points all you have is video. So if you're trying to draw a through line from your data analysis of your data, you might have gaps that would preclude any kind of really good analysis. But by doing multimodal work, you can fill in those gaps. That's a big takeaway I had last year from seeing some pretty high end multimodal applications in like video stream with geospatial.
And that's interesting, actually. What you just described is something that knowledge workers face all the time, which is basically
Yeah.
when they're tasked with a project, it's it's rarely the case that all their data sources are nice, convenient PDF files, right? So
Right. Yeah. No.
sometimes
Log files.
they have to do
Yeah.
research, and it's all sorts of things: images, video, podcasts, right? So.
Well, you know from finance, I mean, when you look at Swift transfers, those insane codes that are embedded, and if you can't like memorize those and make your mind do backflips with them, you'll never figure out what's going on. So I think yeah, I think you had this at a recent, maybe with Tom Smoker, you were talking about how we think of unstructured data as PDFs, and that's great. There's a lot of them, but realistically, we should be talking about log files. We should be talking about transactions. There's a lot of other messier data that we really need from the real world. And I've seen that before where it's like shipping manifests are extremely important for understanding like competitive intelligence.
And so the next thing I want to point out about foundation models is you've heard us talk about reasoning enhanced models, and that trend continues.
Yeah,
So now you have at least three families or four families of models that you can leverage, right? So there's the OpenAI families, Gemini, DeepSeek R1, and Alibaba, I think, has one as well. And I'm sure. Uh, Others will move forward. But a couple of things that are interesting in the short term. One is that this enhanced reasoning, I think, will be increasingly tied to using external tools, right? So in the sense of agents, right? So in other words, these models will be able to determine which external tool, is it web search, is it a database query, is it some other custom tool to invoke
right,
and execute, and then it might be a multi-step process where they have to iterate, right? And then the
right,
second thing that is interesting, so there's the uh, tool use. And then the second thing that's interesting in the reasoning space is, and I'm not sure exactly if this is from the users, Paco, but increasingly it feels like they're also competing around transparency. In other words, here, let me show you how I'm thinking through the problem. So
right, right. Yeah,
OpenAI and Gemini are doing
you
this,
see
right?
more of
So
them.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think that's something that I'm not. I think users want it because they users want to be able to, kind of be have some assurance that okay, yeah, that makes sense. So you're going through. I get it, right? So, but I personally don't really follow.
Oh,
I don't. I
okay.
don't. I don't. I don't expand that window that much, right?
Ah,
Because basically,
I,
I just want the result. So far, I haven't had. I mean, because basically, I haven't had the need to do that yet. But I'm sure it's being driven by. What's your sense? So, who's driving this move
I,
towards?
I
Yeah,
I think I mean I believe that's a personal preference.
yeah,
I believe there's a lot of people who really want to see the details
yeah.
because they'll learn more by
Yeah.
reading through the details as opposed to just accepting the result.
Yeah, yeah, but when you do that, then your competitors can see how your reasoning model is doing its thing, and then they can reverse engineer or distill your model, right? So, but regardless, I think, yeah. So the reasoning models, will increasingly be tied to tool use, and then there's going to be more transparency as to how the reasoning is being done. So, anyway, I don't know if you have any reaction.
No, I'm all for it. I believe that there's a wide range of tooling. It's not just about some large model. And I also, I mean, I think there's so much conflation of like foundation models versus services. A lot of the services that we're seeing are many heterogeneous systems put together under the hood. They're not just some
Yeah, yeah,
broad
yeah. I mean,
model.
I think the tool use is just recognition of the fact that, honestly, that's how knowledge workers do their work, right? Which is
Yeah,
basically they don't rely on one thing,
you're right.
right? So, so they might look up something in a internal database, or they might do a web search, or they may do a paid service like Bloomberg or LexisNexis, right? So
Track down some external
whatever it is,
experts.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
whatever it is that they need to do to get the job done, then
Yeah.
that's what the agent should do, right? So it you can't expect the agent, which is just a foundation model, to know all of these things without relying on external tools, right? So
And I'll add one thing about, I mean, something you said there. As these services begin to leverage more of the external tooling, it also draws it draws it under the microscope the fact that a lot of the external tooling has really horrible UX. Like I was looking at a
yeah,
study where they tried to replace small tasks with using AI apps, and the main takeaway they had was like they lost money on it. They were basically trying to displace 1,000 tasks, 1,000 jobs with something that would be in the realm of what one of these services could generate. And what they found, the limiting factor was like Upwork and these other things have such awful UX that it made it difficult to leverage external tools. So that still begs into something that we've referenced, I think, 2 or 3 times earlier this episode, was just UX is the limiting factor.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I wrote a post about, agents and the 10 things you need to know about agents. Item number one, GUI-based integration. Because, because basically knowledge work still requires a lot of interacting with GUI-based tools. And the thing that alerted me to this, Paco, is I attended a gathering of people building enterprise agent tools, right? So, and one of the things that they kept lamenting was, yeah, we need the foundation models uh, to improve their ability to interact with GUIs, right? So basically, it's the whole visual language model thing, right? So basically,
Yeah.
obviously, if you're building agents, you're not going to build this capability yourself. You're waiting for the foundation model builders to improve on this capability because that's the if you do that, that would be you're going down the process of robotic process automation, and
I,
it's too
yeah.
it's too fragile, right?
I was going to say, are we talking about more Solonis or are we talking about more Selenium? That might be a way to paraphrase this because, like, the Selenium side is really, yeah. I mean, how are you going to deal with external GUIs without going
Yeah,
down a
yeah. So
rabbit
then,
hole?
so then, their expectation is that the foundation model builders are going to get better at this, and they have specific. Each one has specific offerings around this, right? So OpenAI has something, Anthropic has something,
Yeah.
Google has something. So
Well,
at some point you can leverage these things, right? So
and to that point, you've got a conference coming up about AI agents, right?
yeah,
In New
yeah,
York
yeah, yeah.
City.
Agentconference.com. Thank you for alerting me to plug this, Paco. And then, okay, so the last thing I want to say about foundation models and trends. One, the main thing is that it's getting more competitive, right? So with the insertion of potentially the Chinese models becoming competitive. And what does that mean for us? That means two things. One is that we have more models to choose from, potentially, assuming you're comfortable using a foundation model built in China, which some people are not based on their domain or application. And but regardless, this means, and with Google upping its game with the Gemini family models, this means for us, I think, there'll be more frequent updates because
Hmm. More
basically
pressure.
they will need to make sure that they are always slightly on par or ahead of the competition. And what
Yeah.
does more frequent updates mean for us? Well, one, obviously more capable models, but two, to me, that also means the models are going to get trained on more recent data, which,
Yeah.
we talked about the models relying on external tools and RAG being a way to bridge more real-time data. But
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind having the models be trained on more recent data. Period. The foundation models.
Or perhaps finding more efficient ways to train, to update from
Yeah, 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 yeah.
newer
But so
sources. Yeah.
there'll be the competition will
Yeah.
naturally translate to benefits for us who are more in the post-training rather than the pre-training world. We will all benefit from this.
Yeah.
And now the question for me is what will Meta's move be, right? Because Meta, obviously, they had the large
Uh,
family models, which were
right.
good,
Are they
but
going to catch up with the reasoning models? Yeah.
completely out, not completely, but somewhat behind now, right? So on the open models, it seems like DeepSeek and the Quen models are ahead of Meta. Uh, and so
They have a habit.
now they have
They have a, yeah. Sorry.
now they have to now that they have this competition on the open weights models, they have to increase their cadence, which
Yeah, it's true.
the release cadence, which also benefits us, right? So
They have a habit of responding though fairly rapidly. I mean, we saw that with the Llama 3 series. So, yeah, I'm interested to see what we'll find out of Meta.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so to me, the family of foundation models to me now would be Google and Gemini.
Mm,
Anthropic, OpenAI, Meta Llama, although they need to update their models,
right.
DeepSeek, and then Alibaba Quinn, right? So
And yeah, what about the ones from, well, it's not foundational
I
models.
thought I'm
What
not
about the
sure.
models from
Mist
ByteDance?
the what?
ByteDance models that are coming
Oh
out from
yeah,
NVIDIA?
ByteDance models, but they're more ByteDance, being what they are,
Yeah,
their focus is more on the multimodal video kind of things, right? So, which is fine if you're in that space, right? So,
yeah.
uh, and yeah, Mistral, I think I'm not sure why you would use Mistral, right? Because basically on the open models, you have other options. And then if it's not open, because Mistral is not, the better Mistral models are not open. So if it's not
So
open, then there's better non-open models, right?
So I have a question for you about that point. I mean, roll the clock back a year or two ago, there were a lot of efforts coming out of, oil-rich company countries in the Middle East who were pushing toward these large models. Has that been left behind? Are they still competitive in this space? Are they moving in this space?
Yeah, I think there were some Arabic models, right? So out of UAE. So
Mm.
yeah, we'll see. Because on the way out of the door, the Biden administration really tightened the export controls. So we'll see how that impacts. I think they might be able to, uh, there's enough wiggle room in the even in that second set of export controls, given that the current administration, as you know, is transactional. you know so uh so i'm
Another
sure
two
i'm sure
billion from the Saudis. Yeah,
I'm sure they may be given access to some of the tools they need, right?
yeah.
But still, I think, yeah, so you've got OpenAI that is still burning cash, but has a consumer facing product with 300 million users, right? You can go to the middle of Lagos, Nigeria, and ask someone about ChatGPT. They'll know what you're talking about. So there's massive brand awareness around the consumer product. Uh, so there's some stickiness there. Anthropic is a little more, I don't know, much more challenging situation given that it's API. Mainly revenue is API. A lot of it is Amazon. I think
Mm.
85% is from AWS. But API, I mean, I can just switch to another endpoint, right? There's no stickiness there, right? So
Yeah, yeah. That
I
for the enterprise customers, especially, that's a concern.
so
Yeah.
to me, what's befuddling to me is Gemini, because the model itself is actually decent, but
Mm.
Gemini is, I don't know who's the owner of Gemini. I mean, I'm sure
Yeah.
there is a person, but in inside Google, there's so many different initiatives, right? The cloud guys, DeepMind, but who's driving Gemini on the consumer level to make it good, right? So
Nobody's
if
really come
an-
forward about
yeah,
that. Yeah.
if anything, I would say, Paco, if I the main challenge for OpenAI moving forward will be Meta.ai, because I think Zuckerberg is quite motivated to make that better. And it'll be cheap and free probably, right? So as long as you have an Instagram account, you can go on there, and they have the models. If the models get better, and so then they can compete on the chat GPT and really hurt chat GPT on the consumer side. Now, uh, uh, if Google really got its act together, I mean, look, they have distribution on Android, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the Gemini app, boom.
They could be firing on all cylinders.
But
Yeah.
you gotta really kind of make people aware that this is out there and it's doing
Yeah.
well. But when was the last time Google really made a push towards that app? I don't even recall, right? So
Yeah. Not really seeing much strategy, which goes back to your point. Who's really driving it?
whereas the
This
Meta
is something
AI,
that, yeah,
Meta.ai has an advantage because Zuck can drive the thing. If he decides,
yeah.
and I think he's decided, right? So we're gonna make a push for this Meta.ai to take out ChatGPT. Um,
Yeah, or maybe at
he
least
can
like
do that because
displace Anthropic. And yeah,
he's the CEO, right?
yeah.
So in Google, they need someone to do that, to really drive, because they have so many initiatives. Let's do, protein folding and this and that, it's a lot.
Yeah, that's kind of the lore coming out of Google is that, you're if you have an idea, you're allowed some time to push it and then see whether or not you get traction. But there comes a point where they decide, okay, this is going nowhere. We're not really
Yeah,
going
but
to
in the
invest
meantime,
the resources.
ChatGPT is getting out there. Now people
Yeah.
are using it in place of search. You got to be careful. This thing can blindside you, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm still hopeful to see more of these multimodal diffusion methods being applied in areas for more structured uses. Like, for instance, there are a lot of cases of structured diagrams that can be generated, things that are used in like wiring, fire systems, architecture, on and on and on, throughout energy, throughout lots of infrastructure. There's a lot of room, I think, for applying diffusion applications in some of
But
these industrial areas.
that might be the foundation model builders might think those are too small, so someone else will have to take that on.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Somebody else will
yeah,
take on. Yeah, it's
yeah.
not a foundation model, but it's a good application area, and you're showing the existence proof. Like more and more, this is becoming open. So take it and run with it.
So let's see what if this plays out. What at the end of the year, what will the market share of Meta.ai, Gemini, and ChatGPT on the consumer side?
Yeah.
Uh, and like I said, I mean, I use actually Gemini on my iPhone. It's pretty good, right? But I don't think anyone knows that it's there. It's free. It's available. You know what I mean? So
Are they paying you? Are they paying you to publicize?
no, no, no. I mean, I do think that a lot of people are replacing search with this, right? So you've got to be careful if you're Google. And then, like I said, it's not that Meta is not gonna cede this space to OpenAI, the consumer space. So,
Yeah.
they're- and they can go just like Google. I don't think they'll charge anything. You'll just
So
use
should we track an index month by month then of like how much relative
to see how much.
my
Yeah, yeah. I'm
these
not sure.
three have?
Yeah, I'm not sure how many how we'll do that, right? So I guess downloads of the apps, right?
Huh.
So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. All right. So then, last topic I want to talk about is inference scaling, something I've talked about. I'm not going to talk about it much other than go to my newsletter because by the time this episode gets released, I will have a newsletter
Oh, okay.
article about a much more deeper dive into inference scaling, especially in light of these reasoning enhanced models. What are people doing, and what you should be doing as as an AI team to make sure that you are positioned well, given as your usage of reasoning enhanced model increase, obviously inference will be more of a challenge, right? Because inference of these reasoning models tends to be slower, more expensive, and so on and so forth. So there's strategies that I lay out in this newsletter article. But and then the other thing that's somewhat related to this is something that Paco already mentioned, which is basically UX. Because in the reasoning enhanced model space, this thing is thinking, right? So you got to have some sort of strategy while your user is waiting for the answer, which tended to be a lot faster when it was not reasoning enhanced. It was slow back then. Now it's even slower, right? So
So
what
you
what what should you be doing to make sure that your user doesn't bounce while you're
play a game. Yeah, provide mini games, embedded mini games. Great. Well, you had a really good article about this last quarter in December. So this
Yeah,
is
yeah,
an
yeah.
update.
Now I'll wade through some of the more concrete things that people should be thinking about. But
Very, very good. We're
anyway,
tracking that.
I think we can go to recommendations. So
Oh, okay, great.
I'll start. I have a book which I highly, highly recommend everyone reads. The title is called Gambling Man. It's by Lionel Barber, who was the long-term editor of the Financial Times. It's the first biography of Masa Son. Masa Son is one of these figures that everyone in tech has heard about, but there's not been a deep dive into his life. And his life is
Mm.
fascinating because he's Korean Japanese, which poses challenges in Japan, right? Uh, but just the roller coaster of his life of having, he's always kind of that's why the title, Gambling Man, right? So let's put all my chips in the table and then he'll bust and then let's try again and then he'll make a comeback, right? So now he's on his latest comeback where he's has this project, whatever it is, Galactic, the large data centers with OpenAI and Oracle, and then he's investing a lot of money uh, in OpenAI, right? So
And the whole time he's been up against like Berkshire Hathaway, BlackRock, I mean, real heavy hitters. And he's been going up against them consistently and very much outnumbered. So
But
yeah,
this,
fascinating.
this guy tracks the history of tech, basically. I mean,
Yeah,
from the early days of software publishing, right? So he bought Ziff Davis, then he bought Comdex,
yeah,
and so on. And then he was big during the dot com, and then he lost everything. He lost 98% of his net worth,
yeah.
and then now, and then he made a comeback. He did the massive $100 billion VC fund where he would write these ginormous checks, including to WeWork. And then he had another blow up around that WeWork era, and uh, and then now he's on another comeback. This time, he has some interesting pieces in place, right? So, because he bought ARM, right? So, and ARM is going to be a
Right, right, right,
important player, right?
right. Very interesting work there, giving a lot of push to Qualcomm and others. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He tried to sell ARM to NVIDIA, but that got mired in antitrust. So now
right,
they're going forward on their own. So they've just announced
right.
their own AI chips, right? So we'll see. So, like I said, fantastic read. If you're looking for something to read on a long flight or a long weekend, Gambling Man by Lionel Barber. And on to you,
Sort
Carl.
of a sort of a real life Slumdog Millionaire story, right?
Yes. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah.
Very good. Okay. I want to point out there was an essay that I really loved. I'll just give a shout out to it, but got in the notes here. This is from Inez Montani at Explosion, one of the authors of Spacey.
Casey. Yeah.
And so there's a really great essay called How the History of the Web, or sorry, What the History of the Web Can Teach Us About the Future of AI. And some really interesting insights there about don't confuse raising the floor with raising the ceiling. I've got one of the illustrations there. I love this. I clipped it out into the show notes. But just, I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of media coverage and a lot of dialogue that's very myopic and tends to kind of have the blinders on going toward, some sort of sensational story. There's a lot of discussion about, oh my God, huge impact or huge disaster, or whatever. But at the same time, we're also seeing a lot of work in areas like we were talking about earlier in terms of applications um, of okay, it may not be with a foundation model, but it's using an open model. It's making a real big change in this particular vertical. So, yeah, don't confuse raising the ceiling or raising the floor. A few other issues that Inez is pointing out there. Talking about taking back the development process, taking back control, and really looking at like this trajectory that we saw, where you went from static HTML pages to all this emphasis of dynamic pages, and then we went back to static pages and kind of Jamstack. So we've seen some trajectories before. in web development, which are starting to track in terms of trajectories in AI and the fundamental issues that we're grappling with. And I think this fits pretty well with what you're talking about with Andrew as well. We saw similar trajectories out of privacy a decade ago that are now replaying, and there's reasons why at a large scale some of these kind of things play out the way they do. So definitely, check out. I think that Inez has some really excellent advice there if you're trying to parse what's going on in media coverage of AI.
Yeah, yeah. I think just generally the broad lesson is that in tech is that in the early days, it's basically exploratory. No one has the answer. And so people are, so for example, the more concrete example here right now is agents, right? So everyone is exploring what's the right stack, what are the things I need, and so on. People are building frameworks, but maybe it's too early, and so on and so forth. And, 5 years from now, it might look completely different, right? But the basic reason why people are excited is they have these foundation models that uh, are causing them to think that, hey, maybe we can automate a lot more than we used to. And but we don't
Or
know.
augment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we don't know quite yet how to build these agents. But here are some basic ideas that basic elements that have people have come up with, which I actually laid out in this newsletter article, right? So here are the basic elements of what could potentially be an agent stack, but we don't know. It's early days. Because
Yeah.
the models themselves may become more capable. We don't know. The space of models is moving fast, and in the meantime, people are building on top of them. So it's very hard to nail down something that's a moving target, right? So,
And with that, also shout out to your interview about the importance of structure. Your interview with Tom Smoker out of Whitehall, and just breaking down what does graph rag mean, what does rag mean, what do agents mean, but realistically, the process that you go through of putting more structure into the problem means that you're getting into your data and improving your data, understanding your data, and bringing in perhaps other data sources that will juice it up. So yeah, I thought that that notion of like structure as a means of compressing your data and the impact it has on token windows, et cetera, I thought that was brilliant.
yeah, I couldn't believe no one came up with that title when I said why structure is all you need. This is basically the copying Google's title, right? Uh, all right, and with that, thank you, Paco.